The jury's in. Viewers want more of the Honorable David Harwell. Catch part 2 coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at the South Carolina Employment Security Commission's Coastal Workforce Center on Victory Lane in Conway, serving the entire Grand Strand. We're focused on part 2 of the Honorable David Harwell. Good morning, David.
Good morning. Good morning.
I'm sorry, I'm afraid there's some folks who weren't with us yesterday morning. They're tuning in for the part-time. They're not going to know anything about who the Honorable David Harwell is, so we got to do a couple of quick things. But, of course, a lot of folks have seen your name, as we talked about yesterday, driving over the Great Petey River. What caused anyone to give you or to name a bridge for you over there in Florence?
They just think I'm a nice fella. I'm just a country boy that grew up in that area.
I love it. I love it. I was driving up here early this morning. I passed this Edward Burroughs sign, or there's parts of I-95. It's got Edward L. Young, the Lunn Young, the old Lunn House not far from there, and it's fascinating to see the Terry B. Cooper Boulevard down on the Ocean Boulevard down in Surfside. There are a lot of names out there, but there's some requirements that have to happen before you get a name on a bridge.
I don't know whether it's a requirement or not, but I represented Florence County for 6 terms in the legislature before I became a judge, a part of the judiciary, and then when I was a resident circuit judge of the 12th Circuit, that was Florence and Marion County. And then, of course, I was reared in that area.
Right.
In a little community called Mars Bluff. So
Mars Bluff.
So that's noted for the only place in the free world where an atom bomb fell.
An atom bomb fell in Mars Bluff, the only place in the free world. You're
right.
kidding.
No,
when did that happen? What do you... I don't even know what to say. I didn't know how to follow up on that question. That wasn't in your bio.
Thank God it didn't go off. I mean, it just blew a big old hole in the ground about as big as this building. But it was accidentally released from an old B-47 bomber, and it fell in Mars Bluff, right behind Walter Gregg's house. And my brother was in school in England at the time, and he picked up the paper, and it said, "Atom bomb falls on Mars Bluff." He didn't know whether we were all blown away or not. And, I'll never forget that. That's what Mars Bluff is noted for. Now it's noted for Francis Marion University is located in Mars Bluff, at Mars Bluff. The bomb fell about 400 or 500 yards from the present site of Francis Marion University.
That is amazing. That is something I'd never heard. I don't know how many times we've been together either on air or in other places, David. I never heard that you were from the community that had an atom bomb dropped on it.
Yeah.
That's amazing. What do you remember what year that was? Obviously, if your brother was in England, it must be within the last 60 years or so.
It was in the 60s. I can't remember now exactly.
That is amazing.
Early 60s, I guess. It may have been late 50s. I don't remember now, but it was...
Before you got in the legislature, yes.
Yeah.
Before you got in there. And, of course, that must have been a startling thing. You mentioned your service there. It was 62 to 73. Then from 73, literally into the early 90s, you were in the judiciary. But
I retired in 94.
In 94. Wow. Golly. So service from 62 to 94. Of course, when you were elected to the legislature and then later... when you actually became a judge, the legislature was involved with that as well.
It still is. We are one of just 2 or 3 states that does not have public elected judges. Frankly, I think that's good. I do not like public elected judges. They get involved, in too much politics. And I don't think that's a good judiciary where you have that. But anyway, a joint session of both the House and the Senate elect your family court, your circuit court, your appellate Supreme Court judges in South Carolina, as well as a couple of the states have that same procedure.
So all of the judges, I mean, so there's not an instance where the associate justices will help appoint the chief justice. In that instance, it's still the legislature doing everything there.
Yes.
Wow. That's very interesting.
As a general rule, when you get to the level of the judiciary where you're talking about the Supreme Court, you usually become Chief Justice as a result of being the senior justice on the court. As far as I know, it's always been like that. You know, maybe back before the Civil War, it may have been different or something. I do not know, but
sure.
For the past 100 years, it's been the senior justice has been almost automatically elected. He's still elected by joint session of the House and Senate, but the senior justice becomes the Chief Justice. Which
is so often different in the world that your son just joined. You shared yesterday that one of your two boys is a federal judge in the PD in Florence. And, of course, oftentimes there, because of presidential appointment, you'll have someone brought in entirely from the outside because of a vacancy in the chief judge's slot, for instance, and they'll fill that with somebody who may not have the tenure on the bench, albeit I'm sure, or on that court. I'm sure it's
Chief Justice Roberts, United States Supreme Court. He wasn't a judge.
He wasn't even a justice.
He's the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court.
That's a very good point. When my dad joined the bench in 1980, he was made chief judge, and having not been on that court, the court that Walter Cox, later joined.
Yeah.
Of course, that's a great tie-in. Walter Cox is a name that you're involved with now, and have been, I guess, involved with, or he joined the firm that you are a special counsel to.
Yeah.
Nelson, Mullins, Riley, and Scarborough. What was that like, going from being the chief justice of the state's highest court into joining a law firm and then interfacing with judges on the other side?
Well, it's trying to compare apples and oranges. I mean, I enjoy my work back in the legal profession. I do, as you well know, I do a lot of, I guess you'd call high profile or more complicated cases. I handle a lot of arbitration stuff, a lot of mediation stuff, and, tragic situations, security matters, business disputes, things like that try to help people resolve those disputes outside of the courtroom.
Without going to court, right.
Yeah. And that's basically what ADR is all about, alternative dispute resolution. And I enjoy that. I'm working with lawyers and working with the people that are involved in the dispute.
Right.
That is what I primarily do now. I do consult with lawyers from time to time about what I think is the better way to handle something, but I don't actually get involved in the heavy lifting of that. I'm more on just an advisory sort of situation. But as Chief Justice, you run the judicial system for the state of South Carolina. Everything from magistrate's court to family court to circuit court to the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. You are the administrative head of the entire judicial system.
What a lot of work.
You prepare, you run the administrative part of it. You hire the staff, run the staff. It's very involved. In addition to that, I still carried my caseload and writing opinions, and I sat with the court in every hearing. And
doesn't sound like a job many people would want, David. That sounds terrible.
It's a working job.
Chief Justice Toll is going through a lot of the same thing now as you were from 91 to 94. She is the administrative head as well.
Yeah, she is the administrative head. But things have come along. I hate to sound like we were living in a Stone Age, but when I became Chief Justice, as far as administration is concerned, we were living in what I call the yellow pad pencil era. We didn't have computers. I started
in 91.
I started computerizing the courts, and Gene has picked up on that, and has done more and more and will continue to do more and more until we get the entire system computerized, which is good. We need it. I mean, the volume of caseload demands it. But we have administrative heads of the courts, and judges have to respond to the caseload needs and of the workload of the area.
Right.
So it's a very complex system, and it takes a lot of time to do it. In addition to that, as Chief Justice and as a member of the Supreme Court, we had to deal with all the disciplinary problems.
Oh, yeah. Of attorneys.
Judges and attorneys.
Judges and attorneys. Oh, no.
So that took some time. Thank God it didn't require an inordinate amount of time, but it takes time when you're dealing with ethical problems and, and stuff like that. You have to be careful about how you treat those things.
That's like having 3 or 4 jobs in one, David.
You wear a lot of hats as Chief Justice. You wear a lot of hats.
That caseload, writing opinions, working that through, interfacing with your clerks and otherwise. Obviously, the administrative side, taking us from a yellow pad and pen into a computerized world in the early 90s there. And then, as you said, some of the disciplinary actions, there's probably 6 or 7 more hats that you were wearing that we're not even thinking about.
Yeah. Not to mention, you're having to work with all the other members of the court. And judges from all over the state are calling you, saying, Judge, I've got a little problem. How would you like for me to handle this problem? And you try to advise and help as much as you can. You're all part of the judicial system, and back then we weren't near as big as we are now.
Right.
When I was a circuit judge, we didn't have a family court system. We only had 16 circuit judges to cover the entire state of South Carolina.
Wow.
We didn't have a court of appeals. Now they have, I think, 3 panels on the court of appeals. We only appellate court we had was the South Carolina Supreme Court, 5 members. The entire state judiciary, when I was a circuit judge, was a total of 21. 16 circuit judges and 5 members of the Supreme Court.
That is incredible. And
now we've got, I think, 50 circuit judges, 46 family court judges, I think 12 Court of Appeals judges, and 5 Supreme Court.
Now, does that mean that society is just more litigious, or does that mean that there's just not as far a backload of cases because it's being handled much more efficiently? What does that mean? We've grown so much population-wise?
A combination of all of that. Population-wise, we are as a result of being a very democratic society, we are a very litigious society. And that's one of the things that is of concern to me is the cost of litigation today to the average citizen out here. It's becoming prohibitive, and that needs to be addressed. The judiciary and the bar and the legislature, the business community, we really need to get together and try to do some reforms to cut down on the cost of litigation. Discovery has gotten out of hand.